Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. And welcome to our Practical Experience Made Easy live expert panel and Q&A webinar. My name is Caitlin, and I am a manager on the Employee Relations team, and I'm very excited to be your host today. Today, we've invited a panel of experts who will share their practical experience journey and their expertise to give you valuable advice and help you navigate your own journey. Before I introduce the panel, I'd like to briefly go over some housekeeping notes. There's always some housekeeping. First, I'll start off with a few questions for the panel, including some that the audience has pre-submitted so that you can hear their stories. And afterwards, time permitting, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of your own to the panel. You can direct your questions to the whole panel or to specific members of the panel by typing your questions into the Q&A section. You'll notice that the chat has been disabled for this event, so please use the Q&A section. Ensure that your questions that you submit to the Q&A section are general questions for the panel. If you're looking for advice on your own personal situation or have specific PERT how-to questions, you can contact us at our email, practicalexperience@cpaontario.ca, as those questions will be dismissed for today's purpose. Today's webinar will be recorded and sent to you via email, as well as being added to our resource section in the Practical Experience webpage. So let's get started. On our panel today, we have 3 recent PERT students who are now members: Jake Kokovets, Jonathan Witzke, and Aaron Murphy. We've also got 2 mentors, Alex Fisher and Teresa Quinlan Murphy. And we have a CPA reviewer who's joining me because her camera has just not working. So she's just going to be going side to side. Aaron McDonald. So we've got 2 Aarons. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. So Jake, Jonathan, and Aaron, as former students who are now members, can you each tell us a little bit about which PE route you were in, where you worked, whether you're still working there, your position title, and then when you became a CPA? So let's start with Jake.
We should start with.
Oh,
let's start with Jonathan.
Let's start with Jonathan. Jonathan, do you want to unmute? And
Sure. So I was under the experience verification route, and I did this to a municipality called the Town of Pelham in Niagara. I'm still there, and my job title is staff accountant.
And were you in the EVR or PPR route?
EVR.
EVR, okay. Aaron, our dear friend Aaron, not reviewer Aaron, but.
All right, yeah, thank you. So yeah, my name is Aaron Murphy. I'm the CFO of Chris Hadfield Inc. I'm also the assistant controller at League Inc. I was also in the EVR, the experience verification route. I got my letters in May 2022, and I'm still in both of those roles. Actually, one of them that came out of my EVR process that I'll talk about a little bit more later on.
Okay, great. Do we have Jake? Jake's the.
I'm not sure if Jake's figured out the
Jake?
technology yet, so maybe we'll have to
Jake
introduce him after.
might not be with us quite yet. Yeah, so we will get some introductions for our mentors. Alex and Teresa, please tell us a little bit about yourselves, how long you've been a mentor, how many students you've mentored, and have you mentored students in your organization or outside of your organization? Teresa, why don't we start with you?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Quinlan Murphy. I am the current Director, Corporate Services and Treasurer at the Town of Pelham. And I have mentored only one person, Jonathan, so far, but I am currently mentoring another person right now that will be writing her CFE exams May of next year. So that'll be my second person that I'm mentoring. And I've mentored Jonathan for 3 years.
That's great. Thank you. Alex, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Alex Fisher. I'm a senior member of the Office of the Chief Accountant at the Ontario Securities Commission and also an adjunct professor at the Schulich School of Business. And I was Jake's mentor. He was my first mentee. And a little unique situation that I was Jake's mentor, but not his employer. So Jake had an employer that was separate from his mentorship relationship. And I see Jake has joined us.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We'll touch on that a little bit later in terms of like mentoring if you're working in the same organization versus not. Jake, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, if you were PPR, EVR, where you work currently?
So I went through the experience verification route. I worked for a Canadian charity for most of my reporting periods. I was a senior FP&A analyst at the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, and I completed my CPA last June.
Okay, great. And lastly, let's meet our reviewer who's right next to me, and her name is Erin McDonald. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Erin.
Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks for sharing the screen too. I appreciate that. I am one of the officers on the employer relations team who focuses on completion assessments. I've been working for CPA for 16 years. I've spent my entire professional career helping future CPAs achieve their designation, and I'm really excited to be a part of the panel today.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us. Okay, so we're going to get started with some general questions. We often hear from our students, I've got some questions for the former students, now members. We often hear from our students that it takes a very long time to prepare experience reports. Do you agree? What was your experience? Let's start with Jake.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely not something that you can complete in one sitting. I would say the right approach is not to, try to dedicate a full Saturday sitting down and tackling it in one go. It's something that you kind of need to revisit with a fresh set of eyes, and take it in sections and breaks. And I find if you take that approach, you'll it will seem less cumbersome, but also you'll have kind of a more thorough and detailed response. And I find revisiting it, multiple times, it gives you the opportunity to, I'm not sure, I guess, thoroughly address each requirement that you need for each question. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Jonathan.
I would agree that it is overall time consuming, but similar to Jake's advice, what I'd advise is breaking it into chunks. And after you perform particular tasks, complete your first draft version. That's what I would do. So it's fresh in your mind. After the work week, I know it's difficult to set time aside when you're studying and working full time, but believe me, it ends up saving you time if you do it early on. So after I would do specific tasks for competencies, I would then report it just in a draft version and then revisit it later on, improving it before finally submitting it.
That's great advice. Erin, non-reviewer Erin, but new member Erin.
I think, without kind of reiterating what's already been said, is preparation and having an outline. The further I got into the process, the more I realized that if I had an outline, especially just in jot form of what I was going to be reporting on, and complemented that by my mentor had me keep a spreadsheet throughout the work that I was doing in my various roles to try to document sort of the larger tasks that I had and where they might fit into the rubric. And then that would allow me to have a jumping off point so that when it came time to write a report, if I had an outline, when I actually sat down to do it, it wasn't such an overwhelming task. I had this kind of step-by-step process that I would follow through, and that really helped it be more cohesive. And then, yeah, as was already said, taking the time to review it, not just finishing and being like, oh, whew, glad that's out of the way, and then submitting it. Give yourself a day or two, go back and review it. If you have an accountant friend, get them to read it. Really will save you a lot of time on the back end.
Yeah. Erin, what have you seen that works in terms of being a reviewer? What approach have you seen that works?
Definitely noticed that students, if they're quite behind in reporting, they'll try to fit it all into sort of one experience report. And, if it's been some time since you've reported, it's often very difficult to remember, what specific tasks you were completing in 2022. So I think Jonathan and Jake mentioned a great point about jotting things down as you're working. So you can discuss it with your mentor, discuss it with your supervisor. And I think something else that's really important too is take time to do some planning in terms of, reading through the guiding questions and planning out sort of the tasks that you're doing and relating them back to the various competencies. And this is where I think the suggestion Erin made as well, speaking with CPAs, again, the mentor, very helpful as well. So yes.
Alex, just to mention again, you were Jake's mentor when he was a student. Do you have any advice here that helped Jake?
Yeah, I think many people touched on the same thing, and it's really, I think it's project management 101, best expectation on any task you tackle is really starting early to understand what is required. So I think, we all talk about filling it out on a timely basis, but I would even take a step back and say, what are you filling out? Like, what is the goal? And to really understand what the assessor and officer is looking for. And sometimes that requires the student and the mentor to take a step back and read the documents to appreciate what am I exemplifying? What are the criteria that they're looking for? Because if you understand that, it's much easier to plan when you're going to do certain things, work with your supervisor. So I wasn't Jake's employer, but then he could work with his supervisor, work with his director to see where those tasks could be prioritized, slotted. And then obviously, people have said this, do not wait till the last minute. You want to document those things right away. But it's more than just that it's cumbersome. It is cumbersome and it is a lot, but the best quality work and the best quality essays and letters are not ones that are done in the last moments. They're ones where they're reflective. You go back and you're like, does that example make sense? Is that the best example? Is what I'm saying comprehensive enough? Is it deep enough? And that requires you to revisit it kind of over and over and over again. Or you could do it last minute, submit it and get it sent back to you and just frustrate yourself even more, right? So I would echo everything what people said here and add that really understanding what the process is and what they're looking for is fundamental.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Teresa, you were Jonathan's mentor. I think you took a different approach. Can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah. So I think it was probably a little bit easier for me than Alex because I was Jonathan's supervisor and mentor. So I actually was able to control and assign the work that he got. So we used the marking rubric to establish the work plan, and in order to determine what the tasks were needed, what tasks I needed to assign Jonathan in order to meet his level 1 and level 2 experience. Jonathan's current job description did not have all the level of complexity that would enable him to meet the level 2 experience. So by doing the work plan, we looked at the marking rubric and said, okay, what exactly, just like what Alex said, what do we really need here as far as meeting those requirements? And so I was able to move work around from the deputy treasurer and from the financial analyst position in order for Jonathan to get that experience. So that's where, we documented what we thought, what work experience would definitely meet that criteria, and then assigned the work to Jonathan. And then we also met on a regular basis. We met on a weekly basis just to touch base and see how things were going.
I think that's really a good call out here. When the student's supervisor is also their mentor, it gives a great ability to sort of like influence the work that the student is exposed to. And not all students are so fortunate, and so it's a little bit more work on the student's part to help their mentor, if they're not in the organization, or if they're not their direct supervisor, clearly understand the work that they're doing, and as well the technical competencies as well. So I think one of the suggestions that previously had come up was the student providing the guiding questions to the mentor, so they can understand as well. Like, it's a very powerful thing. It's a two-way relationship, and you're helping that mentor understand what CPA Ontario is looking for, and they can help provide you with guidance in terms of the tasks that you're completing. So I think that is really an important call out. We do see that the documentation tends to be stronger, the work tends to be stronger as well, when the supervisor can have direct influence over that work. So we know that not all students are so fortunate, though, right? Some students find mentors other places, and we recognize that as well.
And maybe I can add that even if you have, maybe I can take a step back. One of the things that, when Jake and I met was very clear to me is that Jake is the owner of this process, not me. And so it was really his job to bring me along and say, like, I'm here, you let me know what you need, how I can help you. But he really owned the entire process, and that empowered him and also put the onus on him. And so what I would say to people attending this call is, you are the owner of this process, and this is your career. And so if you want to drive it forward, you want to finish it, you gotta make the meetings with your coaches, you gotta navigate that process. And when obstacles arise, that's when your mentors and coaches can come in and say, how do we deal with that? One of the things, you might have someone like Teresa, who's very willing and able to navigate certain tasks, and there might be other organizations that are more structured and unwilling or unable. And so how do you tackle those situations? What do? You have to plan early, and you have to be the owner of that, to say, okay, how do I begin this conversation? What do I need to do from a strategy perspective? And so as we go through, the various questions, one thing I really want to reiterate is that you are the owner, not your coach, not your supervisor, not your mentor. It's you leading this process, and you have to bring people along to say, I need help here. How can you help me achieve this? Or what can you do to help me navigate this situation?
Yeah, that's really great advice.
Yeah.
Owning the student journey is great advice. And there are lots of resources and stuff available to help guide the students as well. From the PE checklist, everything along, right? So.
Yeah. Erin Murphy. So you'd encountered a barrier with your work experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you overcame it? And
yeah, certainly. So what I encountered basically was born out of my own lack of due diligence and not leveraging the resources that were available. And so as I came to what I thought was going to be the end of my PERT reporting, it became really apparent that what I wasn't getting in my role with Chris Hadfield Inc. was enough exposure to those level 2 competencies. And was not going to be able to get those there. It's, it wasn't really a lack of exposure. It was actually a lack of technical complexity at the organization. And so what I ended up having to do was get loaned out, for lack of a better term, to League Inc., and which was a much larger organization, a much more technically complex accounting environment, super fleshed out finance department, tons of CPAs, working with other new CPAs, working with senior CPAs, reporting to a CPA, of course, incredibly important. And so I spent the better part of, I think, 2 years, really, actually, yeah, October 2020 to May 2022, working simultaneously for Chris Hadfield Inc. and for League Inc., getting those level 2 competencies. And at the time, you know, it really felt like the sky was falling, you know, that this was, you know, a huge burden. And in retrospect, it was actually incredible. You know, I didn't really appreciate at the time how important getting that complexity and that exposure to those level 2 areas was going to boost me forward and really complement the academic education that I got through the CPA PET program and actually prepare me to be a new CPA member.
I think that's a really important thing to call out too. We're often asked, you know, like, what is complex? What does that look like? You know, and we think of it as situations where there's, you know, multiple variables, interrelationships, things may be unclear. You know, the solution's not obvious, you know, it's going to require you to apply some judgment. You know, these are situations that, like, you know, you sort of have to ponder and explore different alternatives to them, right? So that is a great response, though. Thanks, Sarah.
I want to talk a little bit about the regular reporting. You know, students should be reporting semi-annually from their first start date and having mentor meetings, and that's really important. You know, demonstrating progression and what have they done in the last 6 months, and talking to their mentor about that. I want to ask Jake if you have anything you'd like to add in terms of reporting regularly. Were there challenges with that, and how you resolve them?
Yeah, I will. I'll answer that. So I don't know if it will touch on some other points or on what was brought up, but I moved roles a few times within my practical experience route, and the importance of reporting, you know, in a timely manner and every 6 months. I think it's key, especially if, let's say, you're in a more junior role when you start PERT, and you plan on moving to another role. It's important to keep on time with your reports if you're moving between organizations or careers, because you don't know what kind of follow-up might come, let's say, from your report submissions. And if you've already left the organization, or you know, like, you don't know what I would say the more timely you are and the more consistent you are reporting and keeping up to date,
Yeah.
the easier it is to like, if you're transitioning jobs, it is easier to, I don't know, I'm not
Yeah,
sure how.
I think it's like it's important to sort of continue to demonstrate that progression. It's really hard to all of a sudden catch up, and you don't know if you sort of delay this, you don't know how you're progressing, and you can just find out that you haven't been progressing as expected. So I think that's really important.
Maybe I can jump in here,
Yeah,
Caitlin.
go ahead,
One of the
please.
themes that I've noticed is with Jake and Aaron, and it comes up a lot, I think this is life, is that you think, and we all plan, that the road is going to be like this, and it's going
Blue
to be very
sky, blue sky.
smooth. And yeah, I have lots of time and everything is going to go perfectly. But you have two individuals here, and I would echo this right from the beginning. It will not go perfectly. It will
Yeah,
not. And
it's
your supervisor will will leave to another company before they sign off on your report, and you'll have to find them and email them. You'll change jobs even if you didn't plan to. Something will come up, and then the person who is your supervisor, went away to somewhere, and then you have questions. Like, that is life, right? One of the
true.
things,
It's true.
I equate it to, I tell my students before the final exam, plan that you will get a flat tire, plan that the subway will be closed, because honestly, that is what's going to happen once in your life. And so if you think, I'm going to take the bus the same time I do every day and arrive to my final exam on time, once in your lifetime, you are not.
Yeah.
And so the stories that come from Aaron and Jake are ones that are about planning, are about recognizing that obstacles will arise. And so the quicker you do things, the more timely you are, you're minimizing the chances of those obstacles catching up with you.
I think that's great advice too, and staying connected to your organization. If you do change jobs, often we'll ask for org charts or sometimes even financial statements, depending on the situation, to assess the complexity in the organization. And if you're no longer working there or have that connection to the supervisor, that can often be quite a challenge for many of our students. So it's important to sort of think about these things up front as well.
And report while you're there and whatnot.
Right.
We have these semi-annual reporting requirements to help students. We're not trying to be annoying. It's important that they are updating their experience every 6 months and submitting those reports to us based on their next review date, so that they can get the timely feedback on their experience.
Well, that's what it is, right? Like even from a
Mhm.
work perspective, sometimes staff that submit work to me, they think they're done when the work is submitted. But unfortunately, that's not even how work works. And so what you're submitting, you have to expect that there's going to be comments and questions that are going to come back, just like in a work scenario. So when people say, oh, I'm done, I kind of caveat that. I'm like, well, no, I think we're just getting started. This is the first submission. We have to wait for comments, address those, and maybe, having to resubmit it again.
Absolutely,
and so
yeah.
it goes back to the theme that is starting to permeate, which is planning, being flexible, but also being very timely and realistic with your timeline.
Yeah, and it's important to get that feedback on a timely manner, which brings me to my next question for Aaron, reviewer Aaron, not Aaron Murphy. When students receive feedback or questions from the reviewer, which sometimes happens, you'll get an assessment, it goes into follow-up. The reviewer needs more information. How should they approach that?
Well, I'll definitely say take the time to read through all of the feedback that's provided, checking the notes tab, each of the technical competency areas. Try to take the emotion out of it as well, right? It's not the feedback, isn't meant to hurt you. It's meant to provide you guidance and direct you towards, attaining the proficiency that you need. So I always say, read it and then take the emotion out, take a break, and then come back at it with a fresh set of eyes, a fresh, mind. And, if they're asking additional questions, address the reviewer's comments. You can update your responses, or you can use the notes tabs to provide additional information. Often, we do hear that we ask a lot of questions. We do typically need to ask a lot of questions, right? As a CPA, you got to be skeptical and assess what you're reading and truly understand it. I have to be able to explain your file, your situation, to our director ultimately for approval to be admitted to membership. So we want to work together. Always, seek clarification. There are resources available. If we feel that, you haven't made use of the resources, we are going to guide you towards them. If we see that, you're targeting level 2 in a specific area, we're going to say, you're going to need to provide like 3 to 5 complex examples in order for that. And if you are really struggling, often if I see cases where students are really struggling with the documentation, or they're very far behind, if I see many that are, 2-3 years, I'm going to be like, what have you been doing for the last 2 or 3 years? My name is, Aaron, please contact me so I can talk about your file. I want to get you up to speed. I want to get you across the finish line. And you want to be prepared for that advisement call as well, too, right? Have read the guiding questions, so doing that homework, taking the emotion out of it and remembering that we want you to get you to the finish line as much as you want to cross that finish line, right? And I guess one other thing I'd say is that if you spend more time planning the reports, the quality shows through very clearly for us as well. So that I think is another key element. And something to keep in mind too is, if you try to fit all of your experience into one report, we know students don't like the 5,000 character limit. We unfortunately can't read, multiple essays, but, breaking that 3 years of experience across, different experience reports will enable you to provide the examples across the reports. Keep in mind, we don't want weekly reports. Your reports need to be at least a minimum 3 months of duration. Ideally, again, it's a 6-month report. But just keep that in mind if you have a lot of catch up to do. You're going to
don't use the catch up report.
Yeah, no, don't use the catch up report. That's not what that's for. So yes, that would be my feedback in terms of the reviewer feedback. It's an opportunity to get the guidance that you need to get you to the finish line so that you're targeting the right competencies.
So, Erin, actually, I just thought about something. We do have students who, sometimes their assessment is put into follow-up and sometimes it's just reviewed, and some students want an opportunity to redo a reviewed report. But I guess I would speak a little bit about progression and like sort of addressing the reviewer questions on the next reporting period type thing.
Well, that's a good question, right? So, students, by all means, if I encourage them, again, this is your journey, right? If you don't understand the feedback that you've been provided, this is your opportunity to contact the practical experience team and seek additional support in terms of what that looks like, in terms of the reviewer feedback. The expectation was that, again, you've digested that feedback, and potentially, if there is an opportunity, you would address that reviewer feedback in your next report. Because, if you're at 12 months, you still have time to address the reviewer's feedback in your next report. Submit more frequently to the profession. Opportunity, again, to ensure that you are on track towards completion. And we use specific scripts. If we think you should be reporting back to us, please report back to us in a set period of time so that we can give you guidance to track you towards completion.
Just touching on resources, we do have a lot of resources available, and I'd like to ask Erin if there were any resources that you found the most helpful.
Absolutely. I would say it has to be the combination rubric guiding questions PDF. That just made it so clear in terms of what I was targeting, what was being expected from CPA Ontario, and then also being able to take that document. Erin touched on trying to take the emotion out of it. And so it's like when I would look at my feedback, I didn't have to get stirred up or feeling like someone is, CPA Ontario is not working against you. It's a collaborative approach. And so when I look at feedback that maybe felt critical, I could go to this document and see, hey, they mapped out what was expected in terms of a rubric and what were the guiding questions, and I didn't provide it. So how on my next report can I use this document to really craft a report that's going to make sure that when I expect to be at completion, that I'm performing at a high level? Because at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that the CPA designation retains its credibility and its value, and we do that by making sure that we all come out of it at a high standard. And so, using that document and making sure that the role, the work that I'm reporting meets the expectations, and that the report uses those guiding questions, I found tremendously beneficial.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Jonathan, what about you? Anything specific that you found helpful?
Guiding questions and rubric for sure are definitely the most helpful document which I used. Also, I attended webinars similar to this one. I found them to be very helpful, and as well as just the CPA website and the YouTube channel, I found helpful just to kind of get my bearings with how to report and things like that, right? Yeah, that'd be about my comments.
Yeah, and I think Teresa, probably you had mentioned maybe the reviewer feedback is also.
Yeah, so the reviewer feedback, I would use the reviewer feedback when I'd be writing my subsequent report to make sure I'm not, reporting the same thing more than once, or that I'm not making the same mistake again, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then I would be looking at the reviewer feedback just to see, okay, where are the gaps here that, they're looking for more experience here, and how can I, help Jonathan in providing that experience? So it's like, okay, they want more of this, more financial statements, working on the financial statements. Okay, I can give you this section of the financial statements, and that will meet that criteria. More, note disclosure experience. So that was very helpful for me to understand exactly what work to assign to him from the reviewer's feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Jake, would you have anything? Maybe Jake to anything?
Jake, go ahead, chime in. Yeah.
I would just say above and beyond what Erin and Jonathan mentioned. The CPA Ontario website has a lot of resources. Almost overwhelmingly
We love our
enough.
resources, Jake.
Yeah,
We
you can
love
click
our
on a
resources.
link to a link to a link to a link. But I will
We
say
won't stop. Yeah.
when you go through the time to actually go through and you do find those ones, those links or resources that you do find useful or applicable to you, bookmark them, save them, like save it. I just like you can always go back on your next report and you've got these resources saved without having to go through the CPA website again and kind of redirect yourself. So there is a lot on the website that's available. If you do take the time, just save those links. Like that was kind of one pro I would recommend.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And you know, one thing I don't think anyone has touched on either, and maybe if it had come up, but there is a tool online as well for, you know, if you're just getting started in that journey, you know, it's a practical experience planning tool. So it allows you to sort of interact with the different competencies, understanding, you know, what is your area of focus in your job, right? You know, like identifying the correct area of depth, you know, where do you think, you know, those, you know, meaty or complex work is going to come from to help you attain the level 2s that you need. So I think that's a very important call out.
Yeah, there's also, I just want to call it the PE checklist.
Contains all of them.
It has sort of, yeah, has a link how to get set up in PERT if you're EVR or PPR. Yeah, it's got
short little videos.
We love links within links here at CPA. Yeah, so that's really helpful and just helps you keep track of your reporting submission timelines and whatnot.
One thing I was just going to add, sorry, I think that is important. Maybe students aren't aware of this, but it's important to understand, you know, the student code of conduct. What are the regulations? Do you know what the rules are around qualification? Do you understand the practical experience requirements? Have you read the PER? You know, are you aware of student code? You know, this can be found on our website, but there's an expectation, you know, as a student that you've understood this stuff. And if you don't, you need to raise your hand and again, take ownership of that journey, you know, and get the information that you need. And again, if you can't find it, our team at CPA Ontario is more than willing to help assist you with it as well. And in a practical experience point of view, we do definitely have a resource section on our website where you can go and find the many resources that we provide to help our students understand the requirements of completing.
We also have videos for EVR versus PPR and how to complete those reports in PERT, which are very helpful. So we're going to go to some questions that were pre-submitted by our attendees here, specifically for the panel. So I'm going to start with Jonathan, Aaron, Jake, if any of you have input on this. What's considered a complex example and what should you do if you're having trouble identifying complex examples? Anybody want to speak on that?
I think I could jump in on there. I think, you know, complexity, and I think it was touched on before and it's shown in the document, you know, it's the difference between analyzing and actually having to interpret and use some of that professional judgment and do various analysis that are going to come to a conclusion. So, you know, an analysis, I might look at something and the result or the conclusion is obvious versus then that complexity, I'm going to have to apply the skills that I learned in my CPA to actually come up with various outcomes. I might do, you know, several different types of analysis and then try to draw a conclusion from that is not readily obvious. And then for that to really reach that depth, I'm going to have to do that in multiple areas. You know, I'm not going to do that one time and think that I've achieved a complex skill or proficiency. I'm going to have to do that in multiple areas and provide multiple examples.
Yeah.
Good answer.
I would say complexity would come from a couple areas. Like Aaron was saying, you need to have several examples ordinarily to get level 2. And then you also want interrelationships between different areas of the financial statements, right? And as you mentioned as well, you want to have more, you need to be using your professional judgment, you need to be making recommendations, coming to conclusions, that sort of thing. Just doing the analysis or the work won't get you your level 2, specifically in financial reporting. You need to be doing more of the coming up with judgment, different alternatives, routes to go, coming up with recommendations, that sort of thing is key for getting level 2. And then several concise examples. That's what's difficult, is getting the concise examples with the character limit. You need to be very concise with what you're reporting. That was a challenge I had early on. Was I would just try to write everything. I'd say, okay, I would do this, I would do this, I would do this. And I'd have one good example, but it wouldn't be enough to get me a level 2, because I needed to demonstrate that I had several complex examples where I was using professional judgment, coming to conclusions, making recommendations, that sort of thing, right? So being concise is very,
And that's why
is
we
very
have
key.
that character limit, sort of, we don't want you like 3 pages of whatever.
Well, communication is one of the key soft skills, right? CPA students are developing. It's important to be able to be succinct and clear in your communication. And that's why, again, the suggestion of, multiple reports can help you achieve that, right? But don't overlap the dates. Make sure the start and the end dates don't overlap.
Don't
We
want
don't like that.
overlapping.
So that's
It's an important part. You can't re-report
correct.
to get different
Correct.
competencies for a certain period.
Actually, just pick, I think in the next question, I'm specifically going to go to Jonathan. In terms of your role with the government, we definitely get the sense, sometimes the guiding questions are very broad based, right? And so we do have many students who work in government, and often they seem to struggle to understand which competencies areas to be reporting in. So maybe you could share with the group which competency areas you sort of focused on in your role, Jonathan.
Sure. So within government, there's a lot of different types of budgets that we prepare here. So we have capital, we have water, wastewater, and then we have operating, right? So budgeting definitely would be where you want to target your level 2s. And then financial reporting as well. There's a lot of financial reports which are completed, and then annual reports as well. That's also where I targeted level 2s. Also in governments, we have trust statements. So I was responsible for completing the entire trust statement financial statements, which are audited separately, right? So if you're working for a municipality, that could be a section, especially a smaller municipality like mine, that could be a section that could be assigned to you specifically, where you're completing the entire financial statements for that section, and that's audited separately. That's how I was able to get a level 2s for financial reporting.
I know that's
about
relevant.
all I got.
And I think that's a really important call out though, right? Like we do see students muddying the waters between financial reporting and management accounting. Financial reporting is standards-based, looking back, right? Those are information that is going to external stakeholders. Students should always have the lens, if you're doing internal reporting, things that, maximize operations, improve sales, how to maximize profits. Those things are typically falling under the management accounting bucket. And we do see students muddying the waters between financial reporting and management accounting, right? And keep in mind, financial reporting is our standards base, as is audit and taxation, and so those areas are scrutinized quite a bit more as they're standards-based technical competencies. So I think that's important that, we are going to be digging deeper into the standards-based competencies just because of the natures of the competencies. So that's where I say, if your stakeholders are internal, you're likely falling under that management accounting. Yes, you may touch on some financial reporting aspects, but what is the purpose of your role? Where is that focus? I think the next question, so I may jump in and ask a question. I'll ask Jake, how many competencies did you try to report on in each report? Please don't say 20.
No. That's a good question. I think I worked backwards when I did my reporting. So, throughout the 6-month period, I had a list of, what I've accomplished throughout the 6 months and where I thought it would apply within, financial reporting or management accounting or tax. And when it came to doing my PERT response, I focused more on where I was at based off my last review, and what I've kind of done, and if it's valuable to write about to get to the next level, or because you've planned out which competencies you feel like you are going, like, leaning towards a level 2, and I don't know. I don't think there was an exact number, but I didn't try to knock off every bucket in that one response. But I tried to focus on, okay, game plan this time is to get 2 of them up one level, and then this is a new competency because maybe it's a new task that I did this year, and so maybe I'll get a level 1 on this time. It wasn't trying to get them all to a level 2 at the last at that one report. So
yeah, I think that's a good call out. Focusing on a few key ones. As soon as a reviewer personally, if I see that people have populated all of them, I'm going to start to panic.
Technical, yeah.
Yes, I'm going to panic in the technical competencies. And if you're reporting level 0, you do not need to be reporting in that competency. Leave it blank. If it doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you. At the end of the day, you need 8 technical competencies, and 4 of them need to be at a level 2, and I always tell my students, if I have an opportunity for an advisement, give me a few of them so I can pick your strongest ones, but 8, 10, maybe not in every report, but overall, that's an ideal place to sort of fall. So.
I do want to ask Aaron, not you, other Aaron, tips or advice on how to achieve a level 2 on the enabling competencies? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, the enabling competencies are your soft skills. And so I think, really being able to take a holistic approach and look at, where you've got multiple touch points on those soft skills and where you've seen progression. I found that was key for me, is being able to really lay out for my reviewer what path I took in improving those skills and working on those throughout my role, that took me from being really at just scratching the surface of that skill to then getting it up to a level 2. So it's being able to really map out that progression and provide some solid examples of, hey, here's where I had to really lean on my professional ethics and competency, and making it as clear as possible with good bona fide examples and in multiple examples of where you've demonstrated that skill.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to call out too. Enabling skills, as we like to say, they go beyond your day-to-day, communications. It's sort of where you had to think beyond what. There's always an opportunity to learn, right? One of the other things I would say is, you want to be considering multiple alternatives in terms of how could you have handled the situation differently. One thing that I think is really critical, and we do see it often enough that it's worth mentioning in this forum, is every time you need to be reflecting on your CPA values, right? What CPA value is at stake? And, as a CPA student in our program, the values are written right on the page, but I'm not surprised when people make up CPA values. Collaboration is not a value. It's expected in the workforce, but it's not a CPA value, right? So, and the other thing I'd say is you don't need to report them every report. You report them as you get exposure to them, as you have an opportunity to reflect on them. But certainly we want to see that you've been reporting them throughout your journey. And again, they're skills that you're constantly building. So, if you try to achieve them all very early on in your career, early on in your duration, don't be surprised if, we ask you to, have you not been further developing this as you've progressed in your 30-month journey? So it's just something to sort of keep in mind.
Questions? Yeah.
For the mentor.
To the mentors. Let's go to Teresa for this. What advice do you have for mentors on how they can help their mentees who may be in jobs where their job description does not match all the PE requirements?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I was able to identify the gap, and that's where looking for different experiences in the organization that I could move that work to the mentee and enable him to get that experience. So for example, in Jonathan's situation, and also I would always keep my ears open for something. So we had a situation where we needed an analysis done in our rec department, something as simple as, do we keep the ice in the arena with 2 arenas? Do we keep the ice in, for all summer for both, or do we just do one? What's the cost benefit analysis? And so when I knew that the director wanted something like that, I automatically thought this would be a great project for Jonathan. So I'm always looking for, work that would provide that experience. So is that okay?
Yeah, sorry.
No, I just didn't know if there was this, because we had some sound issues
Yes, I
before,
guess
so I didn't know if there was
I guess it's-
a sound issue.
I guess as a follow-up question to that is like, do you have any recommendations, or if like if the student isn't the direct supervisor, you know what I mean? Again, that's one of the big advantages, right? Is as a supervisor, you can influence the work. But if a student isn't in that situation, you know, what advice would you give on approaching their employer to discuss, like, how would you encourage the student to deal with sort of that situation if they weren't in the direct organization?
I think, well, I think it'd be helpful if, one, if you identify with the students what the experience is that the student needed, and then that student can talk to the supervisor about that to say, hey, this is the kind of experience that I need. Is there anything available that I can do to achieve this experience? So just be open and have that dialogue with the supervisor. And even if the supervisor is willing to talk to the mentor, that's great, because then maybe the supervisor and the mentor can work together to help the student achieve their experience.
Great advice, you know, and again, that's that student taking ownership of their journey, right? You know, sometimes we get asked to, it, like, my mentor isn't responding to my request. Well, then, you know, pick up the phone and give them a call, right? You know, again, take ownership over that journey. This is yours. You know, I would say don't demand, but ask to be heard, right? You know, or maybe that relationship isn't working. So again, in the work world, you got to stand and put your hand up and speak up. So I think that that's key as well.
Erin, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
We do get this question a lot. If student was assessed at the proficiency level they were targeting for a specific competency, do they need to keep reporting under that competency in their next report?
I always encourage any students to have an opportunity to speak with. You know, if you are continuing to demonstrate that proficiency, nothing is a guarantee until you reach completion. You want to make it a very, very solid case. So I do think that students should continue to provide examples of how they're continually demonstrating that skill, that competency area, especially if you were awarded something early on and you haven't reported anything since. You know, I'm likely going to come back and say, you know, please, did you just like no other exposure in your entire journey have you had? So, you know, sometimes you may have to report a few times in order to achieve, you know, even the level ones, you know, just to further provide that support, and level twos as well, you know. So just keep that in mind that I do encourage, as you come across new examples, it just makes your case stronger for completion.
Which brings me to a question for the former students. How many times did you report on the same sub-competency area before being assessed at a level 2? Is anyone?
I can answer that question. It varied depending on competencies. So a lot of the enabling ones, I got level 2 first shot. The technical ones, I would say level 2 in the first try. I don't think I got any. It would take 2 or 3 times to get level 2.
And
in
that's
my
progression,
experience.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you need to show the progression and that you're getting more competent to deal with more complex technical work,
Yeah.
right? So for me, it was 2 or 3 times to get my level 2s that I was looking for.
Sorry, just unmuting. Level 2s on report 1, you know what I mean? Unless you're coming in at, you know, a senior financial analyst level, you know, in a really complex environment and you've been working there and you just haven't been reporting to us for a significant amount of time, I'd probably say is a tad aggressive. It takes time to develop those skills, and that's something else, right? It takes time and you want to demonstrate that progression. One of the questions I know we did get pre-submitted question was, should I delay, right? You know, with Cert 2.0 coming, you know, in 2027, should I wait? And my answer is that why would you want to wait? If you could qualify now, why would you wait? And I often ask students, you know, why do you want to be a student forever? Don't you want to be a CPA? You know, that's still 2+ years away, right? You could achieve the requirements by that time. So my advice is don't delay. And if you know I know many of the people that are joining the webinar today haven't started their reporting, you know, and they're really behind and they're concerned, then take action, you know, create your PERT profile, identify your experience route, you know, submit your current job, you know, we can have it assessed, start on that journey, right? You know, lots of resources, once you come in. Once we take a look at your job, we're going to give you feedback and guidance about, okay, here's when we want to see you next. Here's the competence we think that makes sense for your job. We recognize that a job description isn't everything. We're going to tell you too whether we feel your job is, are there risks in your job, meaning we may ask for financial statements, organization charts, or we're going to call out and say, you know what, this environment is not going to allow you to qualify. Just because it demonstrates one level one, know right now that it's not going to get you to the finish line. And honestly, it's better to get that feedback early than get to that 26-month mark, think you're about to cross, and we're like, we have major concerns in your experience. So
that's why you have to keep up with your reporting. You don't want to find out at the last minute that's like you're not progressing. Actually, what's the best way to know if a role counts towards the PE requirements? Is it just the pre-assessment, or is there something they can?
There is tools on our website that they can go and sort of self-assess. I would encourage you to use that, or speak with a CPA, or, you know what I mean, someone who can help you understand the skills in your job and how they relate to the technical competencies. But there are tools like our self-assessment guide on our website that you can use to sort of say, does my job qualify? The entrance requirement is demonstrating level one technical subcompetency. But if that is all your job demonstrates, very high risk, because it means that it will take you longer than the 30 months to achieve the requirements. So keeping that in mind is something really important. I know we're getting close to our final 4 minutes remaining.
Yeah, I want to ask if anybody else has anything to add, any helpful hints, hot tips.
Yeah, I'd like to say, as a mentor, I think it's really important that you're there to touch base with the mentee. Sometimes people are shy. I mean, I'm lucky Jonathan wasn't shy, but I know other people that are going through it, they are, a bit shy to approach the mentee. And it's a very stressful time. And I think you have to recognize that the student is going through either completing, academic studies, they still have to write their exams, like some of them, and then plus the workload, that you're there and you're very supportive, because this is a very difficult journey. So I think that is really a big part of the mentor's role, is to say that I'm behind you, I know you can do it, and really be supportive.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of focus on the educational aspects and the CFE and all that, but the PE part is very intense and time consuming as well. We do get students who are like, oh, I'll just worry about it later. And then it's like womp womp. So yeah.
It's just like the performance review, right? That we all have to do at work. It's always tough looking back going, what did I do last, 2020?
Yeah, you should be making notes throughout your, yeah. Well, anybody else have any final words, or
I just wanted to sort of touch on some other things. We do have a listing of pre-approved program companies on our website. So there is a directory that students can look if they are seeking potential employers. So I think that's something to take advantage of. One of the questions we got is, how much experience can I report in one experience report? There is a maximum of 48 months. But
the maximum should be less than that. It's wild.
That's a 4-year term, but I would say break that up, because you're unlikely going to be able to get the complex examples in the required boxes. So I just sort of wanted to call that out. And then also too, the reviewer team here, we are all CPAs. We do undergo extensive training. We go through regular calibration exercises where, we conduct self-assessments, and we compare to make sure that we are aligned in our assessment. Not only provincially do we do this, but we also do this nationally. As well, we lean on subject matter experts who are CPAs working out in the fields to give us that guidance. Because one of the questions that came in is, do they have experience working in the industry that I'm working in? And so we do cover a wide range of industries and different different routes. So the answer to that question is yes, we go through quite rigorous training in terms of understanding, and we do leverage our subject matter experts. Very passionate team too, in terms of, making a goal of getting those CPAs. Our goal is to get them across the finish line as well. And, the entire employer relations team, as well as the other teams at CPA Ontario, a strong sense of passion that is the purpose of why we are here. So I know my last advice is it's time to take ownership of your CPA journey. Read through some of the resources that we have available. The guiding questions, as many have said, are very, very powerful. If you don't know how to start or where to begin, take a look at the how-to videos. And if you're absolutely lost, please contact us at Practical Experience. Any other things from our students or panelists? We have,
Previous students.
yes, now
Or-
members.
oh, or the audience.
I think your battery is about to die, so.
And my
Well, hope that was informative and helpful for everyone. I want to thank the panel of mentors and now members with
Mhm.
us. So thank you very much.
yeah,
And
thanks everyone.
we hope you have a wonderful,
And this link will be sent out.
yes,
But
this link will be
again,
sent out.
yeah. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.